Welcome to all. SV Union High School and Junior College, Pune, Economics Standard 12. Chapter number 3B, Elasticity of Demand. Topic for today, factors influencing the elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand means the responsiveness of quantity demanded due to a change in price. Which factors influence this quantity demanded or this elasticity of demand? Here we have to understand two important terms. One is elastic and second is inelastic. If there is a change in quantity demanded due to a change in price, we say the demand is elastic. If there is no change in quantity demanded does not respond to a change in price, it is known as inelastic demand. So in this complete answer, we simply have to study whether the demand is elastic or the demand is inelastic. Let us see which are the different factors which influence the elasticity of demand. First factor is nature of commodity. By nature, we can classify commodities as necessaries, comforts and luxury goods. Demand for necessaries like food grains, medicines, textbooks, etc. is relatively inelastic. And for comforts and luxury goods like cars, perfumes, etc., demand is relatively elastic. Second factor which influences elasticity of demand is availability of substitutes. Demand for a commodity will be more elastic if its close substitutes are available in the market. For example, lemon juice, sugarcane juice, etc. But commodities having no close substitutes like salt, the demand will be inelastic. Third, number of uses. Single-use goods have a less elastic demand. Multi-use goods have more elastic demand. For example, electricity, etc. Fourth factor which influences elasticity of demand is habits. Habits make demand for certain goods relatively inelastic. For example, addicted goods, etc. Fifth, durability. The demand for durable goods is relatively elastic. For example, furniture, washing machine, etc. Demand for perishable goods is inelastic. For example, milk, vegetables, etc. Sixth factor, complementary goods. The demand for a commodity which is used in conjunction with other commodities to satisfy a single want is relatively inelastic. For example, a fall in the price of mobile handsets may lead to a rise in demand for SIM cards. 7. Income of the consumer. Demand for goods is usually inelastic if the consumer has high income. The demand pattern of a very rich and an extremely poor person is rarely affected by the significant changes in the price. 8th factor, urgency of needs. Goods which are urgently needed will have a relatively inelastic demand. For example, medicines. Luxury goods which are less urgent have relatively elastic demand. And the last one, time period. Elasticity of demand is always related to period of time. Generally speaking, longer the duration of period, greater will be the elasticity of demand and vice versa. This is because a consumer can change the consumption habits in the long run in favor of cheaper substitutes of the commodities. Now, we have a small table in a summary form explaining the factors or determinants of elasticity of demand. The first determinant is availability of factors. If the availability of factors are abundant, many, obviously demand will change. So price elasticity is relatively elastic. But if there are few factors, availability of factors is very few, less factors are available, the demand will be relatively inelastic. Second determinant, nature of commodity, we have already seen, same point. If the commodity is a necessity, then demand will be relatively inelastic, whereas if the product is a luxury commodity, the demand is relatively elastic. Third, habits. Fourth point again we have seen. Habits make demand inelastic. If you are habituated to a particular product, even if the price rises, you will still purchase the quantity. So it makes demand relatively elastic. Example, you might have noticed in case of businessmen, when a customer comes to their shop, they offer tea to them. Now this has become a habit for consumption of tea every now and then. Even if price of tea rises slightly, demand is not affected because tea consumption has become a habituated act for them. So habits, if the nature is habituated, price elasticity of demand is relatively inelastic. Whereas if you do not have a habit, if it is non-habituated, it is relatively elastic. Fourth factor or determinant is time period. If the period of time given to you is a short run, the elasticity of demand will be relatively inelastic. But if the period given to you is long enough, then you can make adjustments and therefore the elasticity is relatively elastic. Fifth one, postponement of consumption. If there is a possibility that you can postpone, make ahead your consumption, then demand is elastic, changing. So possibility of postponement relatively elastic. Whereas if it is impossible to postpone, then it is relatively inelastic. And the last one given is number of uses of a commodity. If we can put the product commodity to several uses like electricity. If the price of electricity rises, we will use less consumption. So quantity demanded will fall. That is, it is changing. So if there are several uses for a commodity, then the elasticity is relatively elastic. Whereas if we can put the number of uses for which a commodity can be used is specific, only for one purpose, then the elasticity will be relatively inelastic. So in simple words, what you could remember, depending on the different factors, whether the demand is elastic or inelastic. Elastic in simple words you could understand as changing. If the quantity demanded changes due to a change in price, means it is elastic demand. If quantity demanded does not respond, does not change, has no effect, even if price changes, then the elasticity is said to be inelastic, not changing. So these are the important factors which influence, which affect the elasticity of demand of a product.